It's episode 93 of In the Front Row with Mike Vaccaro. Our guest today is Josh Rawitch, the president of the Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. Josh shares his story with us, a journey that started in California, a fan of the Dodgers, eventually working for the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks before becoming the 8th president in the 85 years of the Hall of Fame. He shares his journey and also his time with the Hall, some of the players he's had a chance to meet, and some of the new exhibits coming up in Cooperstown, New York. Plus, he tells us about his infatuation with the Dave Matthews Band. He's seen over 70 shows through his years. All that and more coming up this edition of In the Front Row with Mike Vaccaro. Well, Josh, thanks so much for spending some time with us here. I know it's been a busy time for you with the induction ceremony here recently, but we want to talk about the Hall of Fame, obviously, the most recent inductees, but we want to hear your story first and how you got to where you are. You're the president of the Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown, but your story starts in California, right? So, big California guy. Were you a big baseball guy back then? Was that your sport growing up?
Yeah, it was. Thanks for having me on, Mike. I mean, the reality is I've been a Dodger fan since I was 5-6 years old, and I was just as much into the team as anybody you could ever imagine. And probably from about 5 or 6 years old, loved the game, played it nonstop, played it through high school. And just have been blessed to spend my whole career in the game.
Who was your guy? Who was your go-to guy for the Dodgers growing up?
I don't know if you can see it behind me on the wall, but there's a Steve Sachs pop-up thing back there. I was a second baseman and loved him, loved Hershiser and Gibson, and that 88 team was my team growing up.
That's awesome. But you left California though to go to Indiana. That's where you went to school. What were you going there? What did you think that your future had in store for you?
Honestly, I thought I was going to be the next Vin Scully. When I went to school, I wanted to be a broadcaster. That was what I grew up idolizing the man and thinking, okay, that's how I'm going to stay in baseball. And it wasn't until my freshman year, well, I guess early on in my freshman year, that somebody said, you can work for these teams too. If you send your resume, you never know what will happen. So I created a resume, fired it off to the Dodgers, and somehow landed an internship and have spent my whole career in baseball ever since.
Do you remember the early days during that internship, what you were doing and some of the players that you had a chance to meet early on?
Yeah, it's funny. The very first non-Dodger I ever met was Chipper Jones. I had to go do some random thing where I was connecting a fan to him when he was visiting. And I just think like how crazy it is to go from that point to obviously where I am now. Similarly, Adrian Beltre made it to the big leagues like the week after I got there as a full-time employee. So this past weekend was crazy to be on the stage with this guy, having been there from the very beginning of his career. But intern work is not glamorous, but I was doing like anybody, photocopies and other things. But I remember being involved in, they had something called Think Blue Week, where you basically got to live out your Dodger dreams, and you wrote in a letter, and so people would say, I want to be the groundskeeper, or I want to be the PA announcer, and I helped coordinate that event, and I helped do all the kind of advertising and special events. It was marketing back in the day, but they didn't really call it that. It was the things we now refer to as marketing, but in 1995, it was the advertising and special events department.
Yeah, you parlayed that into a full-time job with the Dodgers. When you get that job, being a California kid, being a Dodgers fan, what was that moment like for you to know that you were going to be working for this franchise?
Honestly, as soon as I got as an intern, I remember my first week there just thinking, man, I could do this forever. It was unpaid back in the days when internships were basically almost all unpaid. And then when I was graduating college, the week before I graduated, I heard that somebody in the department I had worked in left, and I called my boss and said, can I interview for this? And he said, you've been interviewing for the last 3 summers. How quickly can you start? And I'll never forget thinking like, that's crazy. I'm gonna graduate on a Friday, drive back across the country, and start work on Monday. And that was actually the Friday was the day that Mike Piazza got traded. And so my first job when I was back full time was helping working with all the vendors to take down the billboards and buses and all the other things that Piazza was the face of the city. And we were basically taking all that down on my first day full time at the Dodgers.
Full-time in communications eventually, and I would assume it was a little bit different back then than it is in 2024. What was communications on the Major League Baseball level like there back in the early 2000s for you?
I think about this all the time, and we had a fax machine that we would send press releases out, and you would watch and see whether it made it to all the different newspapers and TV stations. And it's crazy to me. I remember pretty early on realizing how many of them were going to non-working numbers. And I was like, we gotta update these numbers. Otherwise it's not. And it's the same concept now. You go and send stuff out via email, and the most important thing is it actually getting looked at and read? So there are a lot of things that haven't changed. At the end of the day, you still have to, you get a request from a media member and they want to talk to Shohei Ohtani, and someone's got to go down and say, hey, Shohei, are you willing to do this interview with Time Magazine or with local NBC? A lot of that same stuff, and telling the story of who the Dodgers were and why they're important in the city, and all that stuff is what I was doing early on, and then ultimately what I got to keep doing for quite some time and absolutely love doing.
Such a historic franchise. More weight on your shoulders to tell that story and make sure that it's accurate. And it, again, the fan base, baseball is, such a big fan base, especially somebody like the Dodgers.
Yeah, it's interesting. I put a lot of pressure on myself, I think, because I was a Dodger fan. I just always felt like it was my job to make sure that nobody wrote bad things about the team and everybody loved us. But the reality is we weren't very good in the years I was there. And a couple highlights, 04 and 08, 09, kind of where you saw playoffs, but for the most part, we were pretty average and bad when I was there. And so, yeah, I definitely put a lot of weight on my own shoulders, but probably not because of the history of the franchise as much because it was what I just loved to do. I loved to be at the ballpark every day.
Talked about Vin Scully. How much interaction did you have with him throughout the season?
Early on, not a ton, but as I moved up, I think when I became the vice president of communications, I want to say in might have been 04, 05, 06, somewhere in there. The years are piling up, but somewhere in there, ultimately I wound up, I guess, being his boss, being the person that he reported in through. And I always found that to be hilarious. Obviously nobody was Vin Scully's boss, but he needed somebody to call for anytime he needed something. So I got to know him quite well over the years, and stayed in touch with him all the way until his final years. And it's one of the great blessings of my life that to know a person who is that incredibly humble and kind, and just every bit as wonderful a human as you would want him to be. He absolutely was.
So again, a California guy, big Dodgers fan. Eventually you move on to the Diamondbacks. What led to that transition for you?
So interestingly, it was a Dodger guy, Derek Hall, who was the PR director and then eventually senior vice president of the Dodgers, who became the president of the Diamondbacks. And it was right around the time that the McCourts were going through the challenges they had. And there was an ownership divorce and bankruptcy, and MLB had come in and taken over our team because they didn't think it was being run properly. And then suddenly Derek Hall called from the Diamondbacks and said, would you ever think about moving your family to Arizona? And it was not something that was ever on my radar. I thought I was going to work for the Dodgers forever, but it led to an amazing decade in Arizona. I absolutely loved my time there. My family loved our time there, and it turned me into the executive I am today. When I left the Dodgers, I was a very different person than I was when I left the Diamondbacks, and I give a lot of credit to the Diamondbacks for helping develop me over a decade.
During your time there, you worked at Arizona State as an adjunct professor, right, in the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. What was your message, and what continues to be your message? I'm sure you're still probably talking to some students. What's your message to them?
Oh man, I loved teaching, and actually Derek was the one I first took over his class at USC when I was still at the Dodgers, and then when I moved to Arizona, I essentially took the class and moved it to ASU. I try very hard to impress upon young people wanting to get into sports, and particularly baseball, that it's an amazing career, but it is a lifestyle choice. I have lived this lifestyle for now, this is my 30th season, and it's not the sort of thing that's 9 to 5. It's not the sort of thing that's even 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week. There were weeks where I was spending the whole week you're barely home. You go home to go to sleep, and you wake up and go to the ballpark again, and you do that. So I would just try to explain to people that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Tommy Lasorda used to say that all the time, but if you don't love it, this is probably not for you, because you don't make as much money in sports. You work way more hours. You're making tons of sacrifices. I never have regretted 1 second of it, but I try to help young people understand just how challenging it is to work in this industry. And then I just love being around students. I love being around people who keep me young and keep me learning and have new ideas. And I do miss teaching the class. I just simply don't have time in my schedule now to do it.
Yeah, you always hear the 162 the season, but I'm sure for somebody in communications, there's almost never an off season, right? Because there's always something going on the professional level these days.
Yeah, the 162 is obviously regular season, but you've got 6 weeks of spring training where for most teams you're away from home for 6 weeks from your family. In Arizona, I was lucky that spring training was down the street, but I would go to Vero Beach for a month and when I was at the Dodgers, or go to Arizona for a month. And then if you're lucky, you got postseason. And so what your off season tends to cut down to November, December, January. In December, you got the winter meetings and you got trades and you got news breaking all the time. And that's what you want. I mean, it's not a complaint. You want people talking about your franchise in the off season, but with that comes somebody who has to do all those things and prepare for the next season, put together the media guides and try to come up with off-season stories that people can tell on the news, and all that stuff was stuff I loved to do back in the day.
So all that Dodgers Diamondbacks, September 2021, you become the president of the Hall of Fame. Tell us about that and what led to that move for you.
Yeah, the previous president, Jeff Idelson, had called me and said, there's a few of you in the game that we think might be good for my position. I'm retiring, and we just put together a short list and you're on it. Would you ever think about moving to Cooperstown? And I remember he called when I was pulling into spring training in Arizona, and I was almost immediately like, that's really cool that you thought of me, but I'm not actually going to move to Cooperstown. Because I think, like so many people, you don't, until you do the research, you don't really realize what an amazing place this is to live and raise a family and to work. And I said, let me go talk to my wife. I came home and she said, how would you ever turn that down if you got that? What an incredible role. And so we went through the process, and as it ended up, obviously I was fortunate to be here. And now I look back and just think how unbelievably lucky I am to be in this place. But it was not anything I ever thought of, I could ever dream of. It was not a thing I ever imagined I would be doing.
How does your communications experience play well into being the president now?
It's certainly the connections that I have. I feel very lucky that I can, all 30 teams, I can pick up the phone and call the president, call the head of communications or the PR director. In many cases, I know a lot of the players and coaches because they're people, as teams, people move around a lot. You wind up meeting a ton of other people around the game. So I think the connectivity of communications people and media members, when Bob Nightingale or Buster Olney or you name it, whoever the person is, calls over here, I feel very comfortable talking to them and helping advocate for the Hall of Fame. So we have an incredible VP of communications and content here. I don't want to do his job. I'm gonna let him do his job, but I appreciate that my background has allowed me to be able to do certain elements of this job that I'm very comfortable at. Standing up and speaking in front of induction this weekend, or doing live TV interviews, are not things I probably would feel comfortable doing if I had been in a different sort of role before this.
Were you ever, when you took over the job, in awe? Did you have a moment, a welcome to the Hall of Fame moment that maybe you didn't have before, going from communications to this role?
Oh, man. I mean, it happened a lot. I mean, I certainly remember the early days. I mean, every day I still try to find a way to get up and go into the museum and look at something I haven't seen. But there's, oh man, I wish I could. There's so many moments. You just walk by a plaque in the gallery. A couple weeks ago, I walked by one of Gabby Hartnett, who was my grandfather's favorite player. Wow. And it just doesn't make any sense that this is where I get to go to work every day. Like, I can't believe I walked through that gallery and I can just peel off and look at a plaque, or I can go onto the second floor and look at an artifact that I didn't know anything about and learn about. But certainly when I got the job, when you get phone calls from all the Hall of Famers or emails who are congratulating you and welcoming you to Cooperstown, that's just silly. I mean, nobody who loves baseball the way we all love the game ever thinks that you're going to get a phone call from whoever it is, saying Jim Palmer sending an email and being like, hey, look forward to meeting you. Like, why does Jim Palmer want to meet me? But I've come to find that it's an incredible fraternity of people here, not just the Hall of Famers, but the 100 or so that work here full time, another 100 who work here part time. It's just an amazing place to come be every single day.
Yeah, I saw you on stage. You welcome those the current Hall of Famers back onto the dais, does it amaze you? And does a little kid in you come out to say, hey, I'm shaking this guy's hand, whether it's Goose Gossage, Mike Schmidt, or whoever?
Yes, it absolutely does. I mean, it's literally ultimately, I think to do this job, I had to learn a long time ago that Hall of Famers or big leaguers are just like any of us, that they'd much rather talk about their families and their life outside of baseball than sit here and talk about baseball all day long. But they also love to talk about baseball, and they recognize that what they've been able to do in their careers is special. And I think that, it happens all the time when I'm sitting at my desk and one of them calls, and it'll be like, I wonder what Joe Torre wants today. And it just, I try not to ever lose that. I think when I lose that, for lack of a better term, fandom or the kid in me, then it's probably time to do something else. I mean, there's a special quality to this job that I hope I never lose. What's your role induction weekend, the ceremonies that go on? Again, you're on the stage, but what's your role during that week? Well, it's interesting. I mean, most people know Sunday because that's what's televised, but it's basically 4 full days of events. Everything we have Hall of Famers starting to come in on Wednesday, and so we're spending a lot of time with them. It could be talking about artifacts that they've donated, or making sure that them and their wives are comfortable and have what they need while they're in town. We've got parties on Friday night and Saturday night. We have a parade on Saturday night that goes to the middle of Main Street. A golf tournament on Saturday during the day. All of that. There's probably 15 events before we even get to induction weekend. And I'm one of the members of the core team of people that puts that together. But everybody at the Hall plays some sort of role in it. So ultimately, just like any other chief executive at an organization, my job is to make sure that all those things happen. And everybody else's job is they get to do the doing, which is obviously the most important part. And then on Sunday, really in a lot of ways, I'm just the traffic cop on stage. I know where everybody's supposed to be at all times. I'm there with Jane, who's the MC, and she's reading plaques, and we're doing photos, and I go and carry the plaque from one place to another. And it's a very strange role. I don't speak much or do much, but I'm trying to keep the inductees kind of calm. They're about to give speeches, so I'll maybe crack a joke and try to put them at ease before they walk up. All those sorts of things are part of what I do. Not really part of the job description, but I guess part of what my job is that weekend. I mean, these guys on the field, fun of all these fans, but this moment kind of unnerves them a little bit. Is that what you see? You've seen the last 3 years of the induction ceremonies you've been a part of? Yeah, there's no doubt. This is not what they're comfortable doing. I mean, these guys are here because they're unbelievable at hitting a ball or pitching a ball, but this is the thing that they hate to do. And so in the same way I'm pretty comfortable sitting here doing this interview or standing on a public space, I can't hit a ball 450 feet or throw a ball 100 miles an hour. So I think when you take somebody out of their element, they're bound to be nervous. But I give the guys this past weekend, and all of them that I've seen here, a ton of credit, because they in some cases they work with speech coaches. They work with a guy in our office who does a lot of help with them. They're willing to kind of step outside their comfort zone and do this, and they tell amazing stories that I think are the reason why this event is so fantastic. Yeah, baseball is certainly made for stories. This is not run by Major League Baseball, correct? The Hall of Fame. But so how does that relationship between the two work? I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think most people do think that it is. But the reality is we are an independent nonprofit. We're a museum. So just like any other, but certainly we operate based on memberships and donors, just like any other nonprofit does. So certainly a plug for anybody who's not a member watching. We'd love to have you become a member of the Hall at our website. But MLB is fantastic with us because in so many ways, we're telling the story of baseball at all levels. It's not just Major League Baseball, but certainly the part of our sport that is the most well known is Major League Baseball. So whether it's artifacts that come off the field at the All-Star game last week, we were there and we got Paul Skenes' hat and Imanaga's hat and Jaron Duran's jersey. Like, those are all things that we work with the league on and the team so that they know we're doing this. MLB does a wonderful job every Memorial Day in helping us put on the event that we put on, because realistically it doesn't pencil out if we're trying to fly 30 major leaguers here and put them up for the weekend. MLB has been gracious for many years to help pay for that expense. So they're fantastic partners. Obviously, we're partners on MLB Network. They carry all of our stuff, but we're not funded by Major League Baseball, and I think that's something most people don't realize.
You mentioned Paul Skenes. You got his hat from the All-Star game. How do you decide, and who decides what artifacts you collect?
It's kind of a committee. There's about 5 or 6 of us here who go over. In the instance of like an All-Star game where you know something's happening, you can talk about it in advance and say, okay, what are some of the storylines we want to tell? And Skenes doing what he's done is really, really unique. Imanaga doing what he's doing. And frankly, we have an exhibit coming up tied to Japanese-American baseball. We thought made sense. Duran was the MVP. So some of the things you can talk about in advance, and then others, the 2 of us that are on the ground at the All-Star game, in that moment, it's our job to say, okay, what were the biggest things that happened? It was an MVP. We think we should try to ask that person for their bat or their jersey. And then year round, we get offered artifacts all the time that we have an accessions committee that talks about the pros and cons of bringing it in. In fact, I think we have literally sitting right next to me that's just arrived in the last couple of days, a bat from Shohei Ohtani. I don't know how well you can see that, but not very well because of the plastic. But Shohei donated this to us. And so we have stuff that just comes in all the time. And it's crazy to think that some of these pieces of history literally are just sitting in my office waiting to make their way over to the collection that just came in today. Yeah,
I know you were in LA recently talking about, is it Yakyu?
Yakyu
is coming out in July of 2025. What can you tell us about that? Japanese baseball, which obviously, as you mentioned, Ohtani and others, it's becoming a big part of Major League Baseball these days.
No doubt. And as you may be aware, certainly your viewers are probably aware that Ichiro Suzuki is eligible for the ballot for the first time for next year. So if he gets inducted on the first ballot, he would be inducted in July, basically 1 month from Friday. 1 year from Friday. And what we wanted to do was tell the story not just about Ichiro, because we don't know whether he's going to get inducted. And while he certainly has a good shot, we don't want to assume anything. But there's no doubt that what you're seeing is an incredible exchange of baseball between the 2 countries. And it's not just on the field, it's off the field. There's these goodwill tours that have been made for more than 100 years. Colleges coming from Japan to the U.S. to learn how to play baseball. Players going from the U.S. to Japan to meet fans and learn the game. So it's called Yakyu baseball, the Trans-Pacific exchange of the game. But it's more than just Ohtani and Ruth taking a tour 100 years ago. It's really going to be a really cool, interactive and engaging exhibit that fans of all backgrounds and all ages are going to want to come to Cooperstown to see for the next several years, because it's not a temporary thing that's only going to be here for a year. It's going to be here for a while.
Well, and another piece of baseball history, obviously, is the Negro Leagues, and you've got a special exhibit there now as well. How important was it to bring that to the forefront and the connection that baseball has had with those players as well?
I mean, it's incredibly critical. I mean, what I think, been very proud of is that we have had an exhibit here since the 70s focused on Black baseball, and we've had 2 or 3 since then that have slowly changed. And as the story changes and as more history happens, you have to keep updating your exhibits. But this was not just this was not an update to Ideals and Injustices. This was a completely torn down the old exhibit, put up a new one, and really told the story through the eyes and voices of the people that lived it. So it's called The Souls of the Game, Voices of Black Baseball, because their voices, it's told in many cases from a first-person perspective by Black players and coaches and executives and umpires and fans who lived the experience. What was it like to be Black in the 1920s? What was it like to be Black in the 40s? What was it like to be Jackie Robinson? And then what's it like to be today with the greatest stars, Mookie Betts, talking about how he wants to see the game evolve, and all of the social justice issues of recent years. None of that stuff was in the old exhibit, and we felt we needed to really make sure that we told that story right. And I think we're really proud that we did it quite well, and actually just got a letter, oddly enough, last week from the White House, from President Biden, commending the Hall of Fame on how we went about it and what we did. And I think that's just an incredibly cool thing that people around the country are taking note of what we're doing here.
Yeah, and one great star during that time just passed, Willie Mays. You know, you have these legends of baseball that passed away here, some big names recently. What happens when that happens? What do you see in the Hall of Fame when somebody like a Willie Mays unfortunately passes away? Do people start to come more often and try to educate themselves and learn about him?
It definitely happens. It's interesting with Willie specifically. We were on our way to Rickwood. When he was not going to be able to attend himself, we had still planned to bring the plaque so that fans could see it. Maybe those who have, every once in a while will take a plaque out of Cooperstown. It's pretty rare, but we had planned to do it, and we got the news that he had passed while we were driving with the plaque to the airport. So it wound up becoming more a celebration of life, and we actually had a big debate about, should we be bringing the plaque back? Should we not go to Rickwood? Because there are people that are going to be here tomorrow that expect to be able to go to Willie's plaque. But the reality is we knew that there were tens of thousands of fans hanging out in Alabama, this town where he grew up, ballpark where he played at. We thought it just made sense to keep doing it. And when a player passes, a Hall of Famer passes, you absolutely get that kind of rekindled interest in their career, and their story gets told again. And that's not just here, but it's online and it's all over the world. And not long after, we lost Orlando Cepeda as well. And I think that having two guys who meant so much to the Bay Area both go within such a short amount of time was pretty crazy.
And you said almost on a daily basis you try to walk around and find something new. Is there an exhibit in there that is just one that gets to you, one that, this is why I'm doing, this is why baseball is such a big part of my life?
Man, I wish I could say there was one. It's the whole thing. I mean, I walk around and it is so impressive what this institution has done for 85 years. And I mean, certainly when you walk into the exhibit we have focused on the World Series, that's what everybody aspires to be. We have a World Series trophy there. We actually had the Rangers World Series trophy there this past weekend that they brought with Adrian. We actually brought it with us when we flew back here with Adrian Beltre and the trophy, which is pretty cool. But that exhibit has all of the World Series rings for the last 100+ years, and baseball card exhibit that certainly reminds you of what it was like growing up and collecting cards. We did something recently on the Savannah Bananas to make sure that we're continuing to stay relevant for the next generation of fans. And it amazes me when I walk into the plaque gallery, you're 7 steps from Babe Ruth's plaque, and yet I will invariably hear a kid walking right here, and they'll see the sign that says that the Savannah Banana exhibit is that way, and they will go, "Oh, Savannah Bananas," and then you just peel off, and it's like, so you have to recognize that different things mean different. It hits people differently, and our job is to make sure that we keep telling the history of baseball in all its iterations and with all its greatness to every age.
Peel off. I see what you did there, talking about the bananas.
I did not mean to say that.
We have had Jesse Cole on here before, so yes, it doesn't surprise me the success that he's having with them.
Yeah.
As you said, 85 years, you're just the 8th president, and you get again, have a chance to be around these guys. Do you just listen on a weekend like this? Do you listen to those stories? Are there a lot of stories that are being told?
Absolutely. I mean, when you get baseball people together, stories just get told. That's what we all do. And certainly, not to lump myself in with them, like they can tell the story from the field. We tell the stories of the funny things that happen in the front office. But Sunday night after in the induction ceremony, part of my job, I host along with the commissioner of baseball a dinner for just the living Hall of Famers. So the only people in the room are Commissioner Manfred, myself, and the Hall of Famers who came back that weekend. And I don't do any talking. I literally just sit at the table. And this year, I think I was with Tony La Russa and Ryan Sandberg and Pat Gillick and who else was at our table? I can't remember. Jim Leland. You just soak it all in. I mean, they have incredible stories to tell. And I just love hearing what they have to say. And any fan, I mean, just to be a fly on the wall in that room is an incredible honor. And it happens all weekend long where you're just sitting around the bar at night and they're telling good stories, and I'm going to just listen. Who
holds court? Who's the biggest guy, the biggest talker during those types of moments?
You know what's fun? I mean, they're all friends with each other. So they're certainly one of the guys who's become the elder statesman throughout the whole weekend is Johnny Bench. He's spoken publicly about how he'll always bring over the new inductees and sit them on the rocking chairs on the veranda at the Otasaga, and they think they're going to get hazed. And he says to them, take a look in, think of how proud you can be. Look at what you accomplished this weekend in your career. And it happened. I watched it happen this year where I could see him pulling guys over one by one. So he's certainly emerged as a leader among the group. And I think it just happens in some ways as you get older and you become the elder statesman of any group. Johnny's kind of taken to that role. But there's a number of guys who are leaders within this group, and it's pretty fun to watch it happen.
Well, the Hall of Fame, I have never been. It's certainly on my bucket list, one of the things I need to do with my son and go up there. But if folks want to get more information, want to get ready for a trip or plan a trip, what's the best way they can do that?
Oh, man, great question. And the answer is baseballhall.org. You literally have a entire section called Plan Your Visit. It explains everything about how we operate, other things to do in Cooperstown. I'm not sure that people really realize how much else there is here. There's an amazing golf course, multiple other museums, tons of great restaurants and places to go shopping, and wineries and breweries and all sorts of cool stuff, all within 5 miles of here. It's just a truly special place. So I tell people all the time, take it off your bucket list, put it on your to-do list. You got to make it happen. And people do. We have hundreds of thousands of visitors every single year.
How much are you going around there during the day when people are in there? Like you said, you mentioned the kids saying, hey, I want to go to the Savannah Bananas. Are you listening in? Are you seeing the reaction of some of these people, both kids and older adults, just reacting to what they're seeing?
No doubt. I mean, I can't. So just where our conference room is forces me to walk through the museum a couple times a day. And I mean, I love just hearing the conversations that happen. And it literally happens every single day where we connect generations. You've got a kid and their parents and their grandparents, and each of them is seeing the game through different eyes and has different favorite players. And I mean, it's incredible to watch it happen and to hear the questions. And I just am blessed to be able to do this for a living.
All right. Where's the closest place to go see Dave Matthews play? You've been to over 60 concerts for Dave Matthews Band. I was reading.
Yeah, I think I've actually.
How did that all start?
It's pretty nuts. I think I might be at 70 now. I was just there last 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago at Saratoga Performing Arts Center. Amazing venue up here. That's about an hour, 15 minutes from Cooperstown. That's where we get most of our good bands, as they call it, SPAC. But Syracuse has good music venues. Actually, Omegang Brewery, which is 10, 15 minutes from here, they get some decent acts out here. They get Modest Mouse and Cake and some of these other kind of well-known bands from back in the day. So, yeah, I'm a big live music guy, Dave Matthews Band for sure. And up here, it's pretty much Saratoga is the best spot.
Have you ever met Dave Matthews?
When I was in my 20s, I was at like one of these small private shows and I shook his hand for a minute, but I've been able to meet a handful of the other guys in the band, and they're just an amazing group of people. And in some ways I recognize that, like, in the way that baseball fans look at Hall of Famers, I can look at these guys, and I'm just as big a fan of what they do on stage as others are what these guys do in the field. But I also gravitate to the people the baseball players that I've gotten to know. I like the guys that are good guys. And that's the Dave Matthews Band group is just 6, 7 really, really good people who just seem like they make good music and seem like people you'd want to hang out with and have a drink with.
I heard your wife likes them. Your kids, not so much.
It's funny. I did just bring my daughter to her first show 2 weeks ago, and she actually said she loved it and really wants to go back. So now the good news is my wife doesn't have to go back-to-back nights. My wife will go one night. My daughter will go. I will not probably get my son there anytime soon.
So is there a goal? Is 100 shows? Is that kind of your goal? Or
no? It's funny. I have a lot of other goals when it comes to travel. I've got goals of countries and states and all that other stuff. But when it comes to these shows, I just, as many as I can go to. It's a happy place for me that I love to be, and it's great music, and you look around and everybody else is enjoying themselves the same way I am. And that's what I love to see.
Well, we show the website. How about you? Are you on social media? How can people follow you and see on the different stops that you make throughout the year?
Yeah, probably the best spot is Twitter. I probably do the most on Twitter/X. It's HOF Prez, PREZ. It was actually Jeff Idelson, my predecessor's account, and he handed that to, I guess, handle he gave to me when he left. So that's probably the best place. I do try to give a taste of what it's like to be in this job, what it's like to live in Cooperstown, not just baseball, but all the other cool things that happen in this village. And anybody that wants to follow, I'd love to show you what slice of life is like up here.
Well, that's great, Josh, excuse me. You're doing a great job here with your work. And again, all the exhibits coming up here. And someday we'll get there. So I appreciate your time here today, and certainly start following you and looking what your journey looks like throughout the year. So I'm assuming you're on the road quite a bit. Do you eventually go to the playoffs, World Series? You follow baseball all the way through, I would think.
We do. I probably travel about a week out of every month. I think my next trip, I'm taking the Joe Mauer plaque to Minnesota in early August. I'm taking the Todd Helton plaque to Colorado in mid-August. But then as we get into the postseason, we definitely go to the World Series every year. We have an exhibit called Autumn Glory that has some things that have been there for many years, but also rotates each year with new artifacts. So right now it features all the Rangers stuff we brought back from last year's World Series. I get the chance to go to some really cool things. Dominican Republic or London or any of the other major events that happen around baseball. We get a chance to be there, and I just it is a decent amount of travel, but I'm not complaining, except for right now when the whole country's plane system is broken and they're trying to. I'm glad I'm not in an airport right now. I guess I'll say that.
So are you allowed to be a fan? Do you have favorites? Do you think you know who's going to win the World Series? Are the Dodgers going to win the World Series?
It's fun. I mean, we don't really, and it seems like a cop-out, but the reality is once I moved into this role, I really started following all 30 teams rather than just the Diamondbacks, who I've been a huge fan of for the last decade, or the Dodgers for 35 years before that. I really do just follow the game now. So I could probably give you all the reasons why 5 different teams might win it, and I'll probably be wrong on all of them, and it'll probably be one of the other 5 that I don't mention that comes out on top. That's the beauty of the game.
It certainly is. Well, Josh, again, we appreciate your time and wish you the best of luck throughout the summer. And again, hopefully folks watching will make their way to Cooperstown and see some of these great exhibits on display now and the ones coming up here shortly.
Well, thanks, Mike. We appreciate it, and look forward to staying in touch here and hopefully seeing you in Cooperstown soon.
Well, we thank Josh for spending a little time with us here today, sharing his story and also telling us about the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. A special thanks to Craig Muter with the Hall for helping arrange that sit down. As always, we thank you for watching and listening and invite you to like, to subscribe, and to also share our shows and our channel, as we'll have more great guests coming your way very soon. For JR Equipment, our creator, producer, and director behind the scenes, I'm Mike Vaccaro. Thanks for joining us. This has been episode number 93 of In the Front Row with Mike Vaccaro. Have a great day, everybody.